In this video, we're going to be looking at the third type of market failure, the fourth type of market failure called common access resources. So common access resources, generally most goods and services in society are privately owned, which basically means that a person or a group of people have property rights over that good or service. They own the good and it's their choice how it's used, and if they want to sell it, they then transfer that ownership onto somebody else and it becomes theirs. So property rights are the formal and informal rules regarding the use, ownership and transfer of property. In most countries, citizens have property rights over the things that belong to them. So there are rules that state that certain people own certain things and therefore it's up to them how they use that resource. So for example, if you own a farm, it's up to you how the land is used. Common access resources are resources that are owned by everyone and usually do not have a market price, and therefore they're available even if people don't pay for them. So they're resources that don't have established property rights, they're owned by everyone, not anyone in particular, and they do not have a market price, and which makes them available for everyone. Features of common access resources. Okay, so you need to be able to explain the difference between common access resources and public goods. So common access resources, like public goods, are non-excludable, meaning anyone can use these resources even if they do not pay for them. That's because there's no property rights. And secondly, they are rivalrous in consumption, meaning that consumption by one individual reduces the amount available for others. That's the key difference between public goods and common access resources. Common access resources are rivalrous in consumption. If one person consumes them, that means there's less available for others. And when you're articulating the difference between the two, the problem with public goods is that they're not provided in a free market because there's no profit motive, because you can't force people to pay. The problem with common access resources is that they're overused because you can't force people to pay for them, and therefore everyone in their own best interest, will overuse these goods and services. So examples of common access resources: the fish in the ocean. So if the fishing industry removes fish from the ocean faster than the rate of reproduction, the ecosystem can be disrupted and fishing stocks will be depleted. So fish in the ocean, nobody has ownership rights over them, and therefore they can be depleted very easily unless we implement sort of restrictions. So in Australia, for example, the government have intervened by having regulations on you can't use nets in Port Phillip Bay, for example. You can't use dynamite. You need to make sure that the fish are of a certain size, so they can't be under a certain size or it's illegal for you to catch them. And you have to have a license to fish. They're all examples of government regulations in the fishing industry. Secondly, forests. So land is destroyed by overgrazing, and that can reduce the biodiversity and fertility. So future generations can't grow as much on that land. And thirdly, clean air. Clean air is a really important common access resource because it can be linked to climate change. So when we intoxicate the atmosphere or dump pollutants in the atmosphere, that can lead to reduced quality of air for all other users, particularly future generations. Why does the existence of common access resources lead to market failure? Okay, well, the market failure is the unsustainable use of common access resources. So the idea is that because they don't have property rights, because they're free, because there's no market signals increasing the prices when there's more demand, that leads to issues for the environment which can impact future consumption and living standards. The key thing with common access resources when you're linking it to efficiency is that it hurts intertemporal efficiency because it's about future generations. So overusing common access resources today reduces the amount available for future generations, reducing their living standards. It's also an example of the trade-off that can occur between promoting economic objectives and promoting the environment. Because, for example, if we want to boost efficiency, boost allocative efficiency by increasing our rate of production, if firms are likely to increase their productivity by increasing their rate of mineral extraction or coal extraction or whatever, then that can lead to lower prices and increased growth, but it can hurt intertemporal efficiency because it starts to deplete our resources. So common access resources, if they're overused, will be less available for future generations, and they can hurt intertemporal efficiency, often because we're more interested in achieving allocative or technical efficiency. So examples, new equipment that allows fishermen to catch more fish per hour, that will lead to a fall in the price and greater purchasing power for the current generation, but it can hurt future generations because there's less fish available for them as well. You'll also hear the word the tragedy of the commons when related to common access resources. That's basically the idea that whereby each person acting in their own self-interest, trying to maximise their own welfare, it can lead to overuse and destruction for other generations. So a good example is if, say, a land is owned by a range of different people, no one actually owns the land and all the farmers have got different cows. There's no incentive for each individual farmer to protect the land because they just want to graze as much as they possibly can in the short term. So it's key to recognise that each person acting in their own self-interest is likely to lead to the overuse or destruction of common access resources. The lack of excludability, the lack of property rights, and the absence of prices leads to excessive production and consumption that can hurt our common access resources. Okay. With property rights, increased demand would have led to higher prices, which would reduce demand and preserve the resources. But without these property rights, that does not occur. So there's also a relationship between common access resources and negative externalities. So often common access resources have many characteristics similar to negative externalities. So for example, if we look at pollution of the air, it's affecting the common access resource. So the common access resource is clean air available for future generations. So the quality of air can be reduced through activities that pollute the air. The negative externality is the cost imposed on the third party, which is the future users of the common access resource have less clean air. So it hurts the common access resource is overused, and the negative externality is that leads to depletion or poorer quality air for future generations. Intertemporal efficiency is reduced by the overconsumption of common access resources. We'll talk about government intervention in the next video.